Response video to Hythloday. He sent me a private video, but I'm not going to make a private video response. I might as well say it publicly. I mean, I've bored you before. You can take it. Yeah. I mean, what I tend to sense from him is that he wants this explicit math. And the math just can't be that explicit. You can't have some sort of universal this and universal that and universal that. It's all qualified by a circumstance. So if I said something like, me not killing my neighbor, or not, beating my neighbor up, it's good that I don't do that. So it's a good. But it's clearly not the kind of good you'd say, it's okay if a kid has cancer for that good. It's not like some sort of real good. It's only a good because it's not a bad. And that's sort of really important here, is that some goods quite obviously are not the kind of goods that you can use to compensate for some other bad. They're good in and of themselves, and they have no good potential in the rest of the universe. They have essentially been used up by the person enjoying the good. My neighbor is enjoying not being beat up. He's benefiting from the good of not being beat up, and it's used up. There's no good left over to go compensate for some other bad. All right? So that's where this reality gets complicated, is that you can't just turn things into a number and say this is a number 3 and this is a number 1 and 3 is more than 1. It just doesn't do that. I mean, it can do that, but you have to qualify everything, and everything has to move with its qualifications. And that's why I'm saying that's where it gets complicated. Anyway, I will try to draw something, but I don't know I have no idea what it is I'm going to draw. Alright, so the first obvious thing in your video, I used the symbol is not equal to. So I used, a exclamation point and the equal sign. It's like a programming language thing. So I thought you'd know what that means, but I didn't say that, preventing a good, a pleasure or a comfort, was a bad. I said it does not equal bad in the case of the non-existent. So, yeah. So you misunderstood that. But the qualification was still there, and the qualification basically made the point that preventing a good is only a bad if someone's going to be harmed by not having their present, their gift of goodness, feeling goodness. So, need has to get into this somewhere. I mean, it's, it's just too vital a concept to what goes on here, is that what gives the bad its nature is the existence of need. Yeah, need. And without that, the negative needs correction. It's not just that the negative is a negative, it's that it needs to be corrected. So yeah, I really don't know how to, you could do it with some kind of like turn that frown upside down kind of thing and say, okay, you have to have a negative face, okay, before you can have some sort of act that would turn this into a smiley face, right? So I mean, that's what we're really talking about. And and generically, oops, you're supposed to be a smiler. Yeah, well, so I don't know how we turn things upside down, but that's the game, really, right? Is to turn the frown upside down. Is there any other game in town? Is there any other game by taking some degree of not good state, not bliss, not bliss? Yeah, so it shows, is that where we should go? Somebody is in not bliss, and so and convert them to some blissful state, for sometimes endurably blissful, like immunity from disease is more endurably blissful, removing something pulling the thorn out of the lion's paw, so to speak. Some sort of clear, easy correction of what's causing the frown. But yeah, it's really the game is just converting the state. So it's not like you can't use a state to compensate for another state. A state doesn't fix another state. They're separate states, and the real game is to create action that converts something from one state to another. And so the question again is in this context of a would be, or in the context of a could be. What's the obligation, or what's the imperative? If you don't need energy, right? If you don't need energy, you wouldn't need to make nuclear power plants, right? And therefore, fail-safe would be a good idea. Fail-safe would be logical, because there's no imperative to create any risk of meltdown. So you wouldn't make a nuclear power plant. Let's say you could make them for free. You wouldn't make one because it carries this negative risk for energy production you don't need. So that's sort of the logical train here, is that there is no imperative to make a non-existent person happy. There is an imperative to make a frown turn a frown upside down. But there is no imperative to take a non-frown, whatever that would look like, the neutral or the nothing, nothing at all here. There is no obligation to correct that. That doesn't need to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. This is bad. Bad has to be corrected. So, and maybe that's a way of looking at this. Bad has to be corrected. Alright, but everything else doesn't. I can't spell when I'm thinking. There we go. Bad has to be corrected. But this doesn't. The non-existent don't need correction. But they certainly need prevention of this. This is always bad. Anytime you risk creating it, even the risk of creating this is bad. Okay? It's always bad. And the good is only correcting the bad. So, it's just the way it is. And I think all these arguments just tend to point to that way. Yeah, so I guess to work with these, we have to work these words in. Need, the imperative, what needs to be done, okay, and the fact that bad has to be corrected, but not bad, a not bad circumstance does not need to be corrected. It does not, there's no need to be corrected, but there still remains a need, okay, not to be frowny faced. Okay, there's still a need not to harm it, but there isn't a need to please it because it doesn't harmed yet. So if you don't break it, you don't have to fix it. Fix maybe is another word, alright, that this is fixing, okay, is what we're doing here. We're not making something. There's no good in here's a free good. The good is in fixing a bad, alright? So that's a huge, so when you got your little circles, you can't just say here's bad and here's good, okay, and these are reciprocal things in equal amounts or something. That's just not the way they grow. A big part of this good is killing the bad. And maybe all of it, like I said, I would speculate that maybe all of the good requires the pre-existence of the negative. That you can't even possibly make a good without the pre-existing threat of a negative. You have to threaten it before you can relieve it of a threat. Yeah. So, but again, something in a not bad state, something that isn't in a negative state, does not need. This is again, we're back to the word need. It does not need. There is no imperative. There is no incentive to impose any risk, and certainly not a high risk of creating mega bad. I mean, for something that doesn't need to be done, you don't create mega bad. That's imbecile. You just don't risk that. There's no logical benefit in that. Alright, so these are the concepts that it has to be understood in. Is that need is what negative creates. And it is not something good has the same benefit of. Good can only exist in the context of eliminating something that needs correcting. Let's see, this is probably a better way to say that. Well, the way I'm pointing it out here is that the asymmetry is not going to work if you think this is a -1 and this is a +1. Because no, this is only a +1 when you're correcting for these -1. There is no +1 unless there is first a -1. You have to be correcting. You have to turn frowns upside down for this good thing to happen. And there's only this little potential sliver of the good that you could argue, like somebody arguing that somebody could be perfectly comfortable, if we can even imagine that state, and yet gain something from an orgasm or some higher state of comfort, and that would be even sustainable as an argument, that psychologically that is even possible. But let's just say, concede that it was. So there is some corner or segment of the experience that you could argue is somehow just perfectly good, in that there's no correction of any kind of negative pre-existing state of need. But I don't think there is, in truth. And I think whatever proportion it is so minute and unimportant that it could not compensate for a single mouse being half killed in a trap. A little mouse in the glue trap or something. Some horror, some awful experience. It couldn't compensate for one of those. So it's a moot as a relevancy. It's a tiny remainder, that just can be disposed with in this math, because it's so overwhelmed by the value of the prevention. Preventing the harm would have so much more value as a good than the good of realizing the mushy, defined real good, real positive that doesn't require the satisfaction of a pre-existing negative or the threat of a negative. So that's another important word. The threat of a negative is a negative. The hope of a good positive is not a positive. Something like that. So anyway, but yeah, this, I don't know whether we're really making progress here, because I think, like I said, that you're going to want to keep quantifying this circumstance into something else and not recognize the fact that good can be made out of not bad. By not harming my neighbor, I have created a good, and I didn't do a damn thing. But that good has no meaning as a number. It's not a 1 sitting out there waiting to compensate for a kid's cancer. The fact that I have not badded does not mean I can use that not bad and then say, well, we have lots of good in the world because look how not bad it is, and therefore we can afford to go buy some bad with our good, because the good is only good in that you aren't as bad as you could be. And it would make no sense to reward not being as bad as you could be, right? Or to say that that has any value to compensate for someone's suffering. It'd just be ludicrous to say the fact that we're all not axe murderers entitles us to torture some kids because that's just so kick-ass that we're not axe murderers causing mayhem every day. No.